The game is going to be on Fox for big noon kickoff. So Gus and Joel are heading. They're bringing the bus. They're heading over there to Ann Arbor and to the big house for big noon kickoff. And we're going to begin with this. I was doing the Cliff and Max show last night, and we talked about that Michigan was a 6.5 point dog. Well, since then, in the last 24 hours, it has gone up to a 7.5 point spread here. And so Texas is favored by 7.5, over-unders 44. So it's expected to be kind of a game where there's some offense, but also the defenses show up too on both sides. So I'm going to start with Matt just as our guest, just to kind of get your first impressions of this matchup and kind of what you're anticipating here.
Yeah, so I mean, this has climbed a lot since the preseason when we talked about it. 3.5, depending where you were. Some sites did have it at 4.5. So anytime like two big brands get together like this, and it climbs that much, like TJ discussed in the pre-show, usually that's a lot of sharp money, big money on that team that's climbing. I think it's going to be interesting too. It could come back down, and more sharp money could come in on the Michigan side towards the when the beginning of the game takes place. You see that like an hour or two before kickoff, it could come back down. So that's going to be interesting to watch as well. If you would have told me in the offseason we'd be favored 7.5 points, I would have been surprised by that. I was pushing my luck with 3.5, 4.5. But after the first week, I do understand it. Now, could it be an overreaction? Absolutely, because the biggest jump a team will make, period, this first week, the second week, and also not just for the team overall, but if you look at units Michigan struggled at, the offensive line is like the one unit that gets progressively better every game by a lot too, especially if you have 5 new starters. So maybe a little bit too much, but I could see 6.5, 7. I think that was fair about 24 hours ago.
Yeah. So like as we discussed, there's a lot of money coming in on this game. The big money is what's moving the line. And I understand, like, if you saw our week 1 performance, you saw Texas's week 1 performance, you would understand the aggressive nature of some of these sharp bettors. That's what's interesting about it. So we will see how the spread goes by the end of the week. I actually would not be surprised to see it go a little bit higher, to be completely honest. I think there's a lot of concern about our quarterback situation. And when I mean higher, I mean maybe another point. But I think there's just a lot of concern. I think not only from some within the Michigan fan base, but I think obviously the neutral observer, listen, our game was prime time. Everyone saw it. There was another big game going on, but like most college football addicts, there's more than one TV going on in the house. So, a lot of people saw what transpired against Fresno State.
Yeah, and Steve Merrill, who does, all this stuff for Mark betting wise, brought up in the offseason Michigan was the most taken under in Vegas too by sharp bettors. So they have been against Michigan from the start. So they're kind of like continuing that trend.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Steve Merrill, who's a part of Voice of College Football Bets. Appreciate Steve. He brings great content. And he's unfortunately normally right. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, look, I think we all realize we have a big game ahead of us. Michigan is capable of winning this game, but I think a lot of us are just going to have to, see how Michigan steps to the plate. It's just what it comes down to. How is Michigan and not only that, like, listen, there is without question a part of me that's like, okay, let's see what this playbook's about. Let's see this team go into, before we get into our next topic, John, but like, let's see what Michigan's capable of, because this is really some do or die. It's not do or die because we all know with the college football playoff now there's literally 3 live. You get 3 lives a season basically. So we'll see how it goes. I'm very intrigued though by the matchup. I want to see what the boys do. I'm excited for it, but there is some cautiousness on my end.
I agree with what Steve Sarkisian in his press conference said. He said this is more of a barometer of like where you are for the season. This isn't going to end your season. This isn't going to make your season, but it's a good point to let you know where you're at and where you can continue to get better at. And I think that's true for both teams because this is an out-of-conference game, so people need to realize that. Like, if you win the Big Ten Conference, you're in the college football playoff. You win the SEC, you're in the college football playoff. If you're coming second in those leagues, you're probably in the college football playoff. If you're coming third, there's a really good chance. So this isn't an end-all, be-all. It's a really fun matchup. It's a really cool matchup. I think a lot of questions on both sides will be answered, probably a little bit more for Michigan than Texas, but it's going to be very fun.
Yeah. And by the way, my bad, Cliff. It's called the Big Ten team rivalry show, not the Cliff and Max show. So yes, that's true. And it was fun. It was a good time. So yeah, I think it would have been very nice for this game to be the third game, and for next game to be Arkansas State, because I think that when you're installing a new quarterback who has not seen very much game time up until now, and you've got a QB2 who essentially is going to be utilized in various packages at various points in the game as well. It would be really nice when you're running a system like that to have two cupcakes in a row, or Fresno State wasn't a cupcake, but you know what I mean. Like, to not have a team that was in the college football playoff, this past playoff, to game two, to have an additional game. So the fact that it's game two, that's not ideal. However, I do believe that just like Michigan ran the beat Georgia drills last year, and really it was beat SEC, but beat Georgia because that would have been the ideal opponent. They worked, I'm sure those principles were utilized against Alabama and probably other teams in the year as well. And I think that they probably in spring and fall camp and in practice have been keeping an eye on, like, knowing that this Texas game is so quick. Now, I don't have any inside intel to confirm or deny that, but I would guess that the Texas game was really the one that people were prepping for, versus I think Fresno was more Absolutely. Of a, hey, we've got to take them seriously as one of the better G5 teams who might be the G5 playoff team even. But Texas, I think the team has had an eye on, and my guess is there are quite a few plays drawn up with pre-snap motion, with misdirection. We saw it a little bit here and there in Fresno. There was one play earlier on where they were disguising a run play with trips to the left, and it actually turned out to be a run play, and they disguised it, and because they disguised it, it went for yardage. That's the type of thing I can see happening more, especially because they're not quite sure yet. We know that Khalil Mullings is slightly better as down the tackles, like the short yardage back. I think they're still figuring out how to best utilize Donovan Edwards. There's a lot going on there. So to have play calling that actually meets that moment and can at least cause problems for your defense, I think that's going to be a thing. So first impressions overall, wish we had another game before this, but it's here and it's big noon kickoff. So it's happening.